Howdy, and welcome to the Petrus Development Show, where we discuss fundraising in the religious sector and how generosity and giving impacts both the organization and the donor. From campus ministries to high schools, from universities and faith-based nonprofits to Catholic parishes, we bring you stories, insights, and best practices that will inspire, educate, and inform you to go out and raise more money for your ministry and the kingdom. God bless, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, howdy everybody, and welcome to the Petrus Development Show, where we talk about nonprofit fundraising and how to do it well. My name is Rhen from Petrus Development, and joining me today is Andrew Robinson, owner and president of Petrus. Welcome, Andrew.
Howdy, Rhen. Howdy, listener. Thanks for being here. It's always a pleasure. I love talking about fundraising and nonprofit world and all the things that you've got planned for us today, Rhen. It's exciting.
Excellent, great. What's new in your world? How's your spring into? I guess it's probably summer in Texas going.
Yeah, it's hot. It's already in the 90s during the day. My kids are starting, or they're in swim team season already. So swimming in the pool without a heater, which is probably, I don't know if you're at that point yet in Michigan, but we hit that point a pretty while ago. So yeah, it's kind of getting into, being outdoors, playing the sports again, all that kind of stuff. So.
Excellent. Yeah, I was looking at my photo history, whatever my memory is on my phone, and I have pictures from May a few years ago where I was cross country skiing, but unfortunately not this year. But church league softball just started up, so
Hey-o, that's exciting.
All the dads from our parish playing some softball. We're playing a lot of teams that have a lot of high schoolers, and ours has none. So it's all dads who are past our glory days.
Okay.
Yeah, I had an RBI last night. Pretty exciting.
Hey, look at you. Way to
We
go.
lost like 15-3, so it didn't really
Okay.
make any difference. I did have one catch to a pop-up that came to me at second base, so that was exciting. But I also had one that I totally fumbled, kicked the ball when it fell, but I kicked it right to my shortstop. He tagged the guy out, so
It's
perfect.
better off than catching it. It sounds like.
Yeah, it worked out better than expected. Let's say
Yeah,
that.
that's good.
It's been a little bit of a struggle. I haven't played softball or baseball since seventh grade, I think. So
Yeah.
working on getting back into shape a little bit, getting the athleticism back a little bit. I've been doing some P90X, which I know
Oh
you
my
did back
gosh.
in the day.
Tony
I did.
Horton, huh?
That's
All
right.
right.
That's right. When I was in college, I did it pretty religiously, and I went from 2 pull-ups, being able to do 2, to doing 24 straight at one point. So
Nice.
it got me in shape 20 years ago.
Okay.
We'll see.
So
We'll see.
are you starting at 2 pull-ups now? Is that your baseline again?
I'm starting in negative territory
Okay.
at this point.
Right.
Very negative. So we got a long ways to go. I heard
That's
you
all
got
right.
back in the gym though after your injury in the fall.
Yeah. The injury in the fall took me out of really anything active for a while. But yeah, I've been back. I started playing basketball couple weeks ago. Started off taking it slow, and now it's full steam, full speed, and actually. I've been going back to, I would say don't tell my wife, but she knows. She just doesn't like it. But I've been going back to the gym, not doing the MMA, but just doing boxing, and really, kind of more cardio. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun getting back into trying to get back into shape after I was in. The tragedy is that these things always happen when you don't want them to. I was starting to get in pretty darn good shape, working out in the fall before broke my leg and had to stop, and so now I'm just trying to get back to that level. But it's been good. The workout today was one-armed punches, and so yeah, he bound my one arm like this with the exercise band, and so we had to do bag work with our left. And I thought this is gonna be tough. 45 minutes of that. We did,
Wow.
yeah, 45 minutes. Like I don't know how I'm able to even like lift my left arm right now. It's we did bag work, we did partner work. It was a lot, but it's good. That's what you got to do. So
Whatever keeps you from injuring the other leg, because I think if that happens, Cheryl's gonna have you sleeping on my couch or something for a while.
Yes, yes. The message was pretty clear that if I uh, have a similar type of accident, then I will be in big trouble. But my a buddy of mine told me a couple years ago that it's in your 40s, like kind of mid to late 40s, that for at least for a man, that you're in peak physical shape or potential to be in peak physical shape. And then as we age, you kind of just naturally your body goes on this kind of slow, long decline into not being as able to be as active as much, and sort of physical ailments. And so his theory was you want to start like at the highest possible point if you're going to be on this decline for the rest of your life. And so he got really into shape in his 40s, was doing CrossFit and all this stuff, and I thought that's good advice. Like, I'm 42, I'm about to be 43, and I want to go into my sort of twilight years in good health. And so that's kind of where I'm trying to do, and be intentional about working out and exercising, is looking to the future.
Great, makes a lot of sense. That's
Yeah.
a good point. As we transition into our topic today, which is making a plan for our nonprofits with budgeting. We're coming up at the
Mm.
not everybody but a lot of organizations have their fiscal year ending June 30th. New fiscal year starting July 1st. They're probably already in the middle of planning out the budget and making their development plan for the year.
Yep, you're exactly right. And at the end of May, if you're just now working on your budget to start July 1, I'd say you're kind of a little bit behind the curve. You really want to go into your late spring having a pretty good idea, but maybe that's not you. Maybe you have been looking at it, planning it, and you have a pretty good idea, and you're listening to this just to kind of refine it. But if you're starting late, like, you know, better to start now than to not start at all, right? And this year can be, if your fiscal year does start July 1, and you're working on your budget now, there's still time to get something in order. Even if you're not ready to roll out July 1, you have a pretty good sense, and then that puts you in a really good position for next year, right? Like, it's all about budgeting and planning for the future and strategic planning and all of that. It's about starting where you start, and then every year you have a baseline that you can improve on gradually.
Exactly. And I will say, as we get started here, this topic feels like it's probably pretty boring, right? I remember when I started fundraising, you were my consultant. You came up
Yeah.
one time and you said, "We're going to spend this afternoon making a development budget." And I was like, "Oh, come on. Seriously?" But that one thing was probably one of the most transformational things for my fundraising going forward. Like, it shows you where are your strengths in your fundraising program, where are your weaknesses, what can we improve this next year, what's already going well, what can we add, what can we afford to add, right? And it just changes everything within your program. So it is worth the time and effort to dig into this.
Exactly right. And I am not a numbers guy. I think I've said on this podcast many times, I am a history major. I wrote papers in college. I did not fill out spreadsheets and do long math equations. And yet I understand the importance of looking at numbers, at developing financial plans, financial models. And sometimes, you have to, like you said, it might sound boring, and it might be boring, and hopefully not. I think that the way that we approach it and the way that we're going to talk about today, it's kind of pretty exciting, pretty cool. But sometimes it's a moment in time, right? You have to, you have to do the workout. You have to get up early, and the alarm clock goes off at 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning. You have to turn off the alarm, get out of bed, and do it. You don't want to, but if you do that enough times, you do put in that work enough times, then eventually you see the results pay out over time.
Excellent. So by the end of this episode, we're going to come back and talk about a tool that we used, both my ministry and others, organizations I've worked with have used, that just make this process so much more effective. But let's work our way to there. Let's start with why budget, even in the first place, right? The most fundamental question there. Why spend time on this process?
Okay, so your question was, why do we even need to make a budget, right? Why do we need to, as fundraisers, our goal is to go out and bring in as much money as possible for our organizations, right? What does it matter if we have a budget? Well, there's a lot of reasons. One, it allows you to plan, right? If you know what your goal is, and then you can work your way back from your goal to create your plan, which ultimately your plan is going to affect your actions and your activities. And then your actions and your activities are set up by your daily routine and your daily strategies, right? So it's all about starting with the end in mind, with your plan, and then starting with your end goal in mind, and then working your way backwards towards what do I need to do today to get one step closer to that plan.
Right. So you almost have two different budgets that you're looking at, right? You're budgeting how much you're going to spend in the coming year, but you're also using that to budget how much are we going to raise and how are we going to do that with our fundraising, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's probably worth a clarification, right? So a budget, in your mind, if you're listening to this, you might think, okay, what he's talking about is a budget for the development office. How much are we allowed to spend on events, and how much are we allowed to spend on travel? And that's a part of it. But what I'm also talking about is how, as holistically, comprehensively, what is your organizational budget? What are the expenses that you need to plan for in order to implement your mission, whatever that is? But then on the flip side, how are you going to maximize your revenue to be able to accomplish that? So, just a really quick story. A friend of mine was on the finance council for a very large parish, and they had a large school and a lot of activities. And so they had a really big budget. It was in the millions of dollars. And when COVID started ramping up and they saw collections kind of dropping, then the natural tendency was to say, as a finance council, to say, what are we going to cut? How are we going to lower that income side, or that, excuse me, how are we going to lower that expense side so that we don't put ourselves in a bad position by spending too much, which is a prudent way to look at it, right? Because you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're accruing debt and all of that. So it's prudent and it's smart. But what his question is why is that the only option? Why is decreasing our expenses the only option? Why can't we look at increasing our revenue? And that's also a prudent decision as well, but it's also a kind of a more mission-oriented decision as well, and a mission-oriented outlook. It's this attitude of abundance. It's if we go out and we do what we need to serve our people, to accomplish our mission, and we put ourselves in a position where we are trying to generate more gifts, more dollars, more revenue to be able to fund that mission, then at the end of the day, we are in a position where God is going to bless our work, as opposed to what are we going to cut and eliminate so that we can make do with the scarce amount that we know we have coming in.
Right. Right. So having more of an abundance mentality rather than a scarcity mentality. That makes a lot of sense.
And everybody's situation is impacted by your experience, right? Your lived experience in the past, your lived experience today. And so sometimes it can be hard to kind of shift gears and think about it. But that's why creating these budgets, when you're in a space that you're not in crisis, or you're not in, sort of that scarcity mode, that fear-driven mode, that's where you can really make long-term plans, cast a vision, and then align your finances to accomplish that mission.
Are you ready to unlock transformational growth for your organization? It's time to grow your mission to new heights and make a lasting impact. Picture this: building meaningful relationships with donor prospects and asking them for gifts that can truly multiply the impact of your mission. That's what Major Gift Fundraising is all about. Major Gifts Fundraising is all about moving from transactional to relational with your organization's donors and supporters. It's time to put aside high-effort, low-return activities like bake sales and car washes. The organizations making the biggest waves are the ones building genuine connections with prospects and asking them for major gifts. But here's the thing: fundraising is both a science and an art. Relating to donors is where the art really comes into play. So many questions come up when you try to find the best approach for each donor. What's the right approach for this prospect? When should I ask for a gift? How much should I ask for? What project should I invite them to support? It can take years to master the art of building these crucial relationships with donors. But here's the good news. Working with a Petrus fundraising coach in our Major Gifts coaching program will shorten that learning curve and maximize your return. Here's what's included: weekly check-ins, Your fundraising coach will be by your side with weekly calls to answer your questions, strategize for donor meetings, and provide feedback on recent interactions. In-person coaching. Your coach will spend valuable time with you in person, whether at your headquarters or in the field. They'll accompany you on donor visits, offering personal feedback and coaching to supercharge your Major Gifts fundraising efforts. Course access. You'll have 24/7 on-demand access to the Petrus boat and annual manual courses. These resources cover fundraising fundamentals and annual fund growth, giving you a solid foundation to build on. But don't just take our word for it. Listen to what Father Ben Haas, pastor of St. Albert the Great University Parish at Michigan Tech, had to say about Major Gifts coaching. Since beginning Major Gift coaching, we've seen substantial growth in overall giving, total donors, and total number of gifts. We built relationships with a new advisory council, hundreds of alumni, parents, and other supporters through face-to-face meetings. So, if you're listening to this and ready to take your organization to new heights, visit petrusdevelopment.com/majorgifts today. Let's embark on this journey of transformational growth together. That's petrusdevelopment.com/majorgifts.
Great. So let's start with talking about how to set that budget for your expenses. The programming you're going to offer, the things you're going to spend the money on. What does that process look like, or what are some different versions of what that process looks like?
Yeah. So you asked about the process, right? There's there's kind of a very common practice for how budgets are set and how development goals are assigned, and that's the word I'm using is assigned. But then the offices that I've been in that function the best they have a kind of a different approach, right? So option A, when you're developing your budget for the year, is the pastoral side of your organization, right? Your whatever your organization is, the sort of the client facing, the participant facing, the ones that do the work, the programming. They come in and they say, hey, here's all of the money that we need to be able to do what we want. And then they set the goal, and then they tell the development office, or somebody tells the development office, here's your goal. In order for the programming to happen at the level that the other side wants, right, then we need $1 million this year, or whatever that is. And maybe it's the same as last year, maybe it's an increase, who knows. And then the development office says, okay, well, then we'll go out and raise $1 million. So that's kind of how most budgets are set. The offices that I've been in and that I advocate for with our clients, with others, is a different approach. It's a let's engage development in the conversation about programming expenses and needs and all of that. Look at history and help them to understand and to be able to inform what is possible, right? So so the development officer, certainly after they've been there for a while, they know we grew our monthly giving by 25% last year, and I think that's going to continue to grow. So I feel comfortable with setting our goal X% higher. Or Major Gifts, we finished a campaign a couple of years ago, people are finishing their pledges. I feel like Major Gifts we can see an uptick in that. That's really going to allow us to increase our revenue this year. Or the opposite, right? Like a lot of our donors, we saw a lot of giving last year, but this changed or these circumstances changed, and I think that we're not going to see that level of income from this section of our donor pool. We're going to try to make that up other ways, but there's some risk associated with that, so we're not going to be able to see that increase. And so they can inform, and then the programming and the development work together to actually set a goal that is an income goal that's aligned better with what the development office sees possible and what the programming needs and wants in order to be able to implement their goals.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So one of the questions we get a lot, and I've heard you talk about it before, and I really like how you've kind of approached it, is, okay, we're just starting out fundraising. We have no idea what is even possible. What's the right expected growth from our first year to our second year, or from year 0 to year 1, right? Can you talk about kind of what that progression looks like in growth and fundraising, especially early on?
Yeah, sure.
Program?
Absolutely. So So at Petrus, we use the three words form, build, and grow a lot. So I'll kind of use those in what you're talking about: year one, year two, year three, and just sort of disclaimer out there, right? We work on 12-month, cycles, but that doesn't mean your donors do, right? So sometimes these are going to be kind of extended or shortened, but just kind of think about year one, year two, year three in goal setting, right? So year one, going from 0 to 1, when you've never done any development, you have a lot of opportunity for people that want to give to your organization and have never been approached with intentionality or with strategy. And so you start getting intentional about fundraising, meaning you send newsletters, you send appeal letters where you ask for funds, you update your website, those kind of like little shifts. You schedule coffee and meetings with donors who have loved your organization. Those little shifts will see your revenue from going from 0 to 1 shoot up. So it's kind of like boom, right? Just that little bit of intentionality and the little bit of strategy will help you to. What you're doing is you're forming systems and you're trying new programs, and so your revenue will bump up significantly in year one, right?
Right.
Year two, so going from year one to year two, is when those systems they've kind of they've had that initial impact on your donors, so they're going to continue to give, but you're not going to see in year going from year one to year two a similar type of growth pattern, right? You're going to kind of slow down while those systems, those newsletters, those appeal letters, those monthly gives, they start churning and they start kind of generating consistent sustainable revenue, not zero revenue to some revenue. It's consistent and sustainable. So that's where you're kind of building on, so form, build, grow. You're building on that foundation to go from, shooting up, and then you're kind of, slow growth in year two. And so your growth in year two, I guess, so year one to year two is going to be moderate because you're kind of churning those processes. But in year two, a lot of development officers, they've kind of got those systems going, those processes are in place. Now they can start cultivating and doing more discovery. So they can start spending more time out with their benefactors and their prospective donors and their donors. And so they're starting those relationships, right? So that's a good thing. They're not generating revenue just yet, but it's a good thing to start those relationships. Year three is grow. So we've got form, you built the foundation, build, you're building on that. And then year three, in every office that I was a part of and in organizations that we work with as clients of Petrus, year three is that's the sweet spot. That's where your systems are in place from year one. Your foundation is there. Year two, you've built those relationships, you've cultivated, you've discovered, you've done more discovery. Year three is when you see that. So if you're looking at, the video of this, you see kind of a sharp shoot up from year 0 to 1, right? Low hanging fruit, kind of, haven't been asking. In year two, you kind of slow down a little bit. And year three, boom, you're off again. And so that's where a lot of that development of relationship, that development of processes, that starts to really pay off. And year three is when revenue is really going to start jumping off the charts.
Do you have maybe a rule of thumb for what those percentages of growth look like from year 1 to 2 and 2 to 3? Is it 100% growth? Is it 10%
Yeah.
growth? What's reasonable?
Yeah. So, so these are ballpark, and it's all going to depend on kind of, a lot of different factors, right? But going in year one, it's not unreasonable to expect 100% increase in your giving just in year one. But it's because you're starting from a low level, right? So if you're starting at, $1,000 a year, and all of a sudden you raise, $2,000 or $5,000 a year, like that's a high increase, right? So you're looking at, as much as 100% or even more increase in year one. Year two is going to slow down to where you're maybe at maybe 50%, maybe kind of 30 to 50% growth in year two. But it's because your starting number is a little bit bigger and you're starting that kind of churn, that slow increase in revenue. Year three is when you can start seeing more dollars, but the percentages are down. So year three, you're still looking at like a 20 to 30% increase in year three, but it's a lot more dollars because you're just starting at kind of a higher level. So, and then kind of beyond year 3, what I tell people is if you can, initially when you're kind of just getting, building a development program for the first 5 to 10 years, it's not unreasonable for you to see 10 to 15% growth year over year in your revenue, your fundraising revenue. And that's a good thing. And, finance councils and boards, they're going to want to see bigger numbers. But like if you can get 10% growth year after year for the first 10 years of having a development office, like, man, you're in a tremendous spot, because the sustainability of putting those practices in place is going to mean that increase can continue year after year after year as the development office grows, as your staff, as the programming then grows because you have more revenue. It's just going to continue to feed that.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't have kind of historical data from where you're starting from, right? If you either haven't raised any gifts, or if you maybe just weren't recording those gifts somewhere, I think that the key here is just to start, right? Like get some
Yeah.
data this year so you can start moving
Yep.
forward and seeing what those trends are, right?
Yep. Set your alarm and start waking up, right? Like, we keep going back to this working out reference, or sign up for the softball team, right? Or, put in that first P90X DVD. Do you have DVDs, or are you doing the
I
online?
I did buy the DVDs. I like
Awesome.
it.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. So, but that's your first step, right? You had to buy and own the DVDs and find your DVD player, hook it up so that you're ready to go. Without those kind of very basic steps in place, you're not doing P90X. It's the same thing with budgeting. You have to start, and even if the first basic steps seem so simple, it's using this spreadsheet that we're talking about. It's setting up a meeting with the development office and the programming side to talk about revenue. It's like those very basic things that seem like so elementary you shouldn't even have to do them, but if you're not doing those things, then there's no way you're going to be able to have anything to build on.
Yeah, exactly. So as you're ramping up these activities, all in your fundraising office over time, you're gonna have some expenses there, right? It costs money
Yeah.
to take somebody out for coffee, for lunch, to send out mailings. Do you have maybe a rule of thumb of what your kind of expenses to income ratio should be for fundraising? Because there is going to be a cost of doing business.
Yeah, totally. So this is I don't want to call it a loaded question or a tricky question, but in the nonprofit world, sort of outside of, kind of a little bit outside like the ministry space. And by that, I mean like kind of smaller nonprofits. So when you start looking at like mega nonprofits like Red Cross, like major hospitals, these kind of global efforts, there is a movement to eliminate overhead and expenses of fundraising, to the point that if there are websites that track how much money is coming in versus how much is spent, and if you're not in like the you know 95 to 90% range, meaning that you're spending $1 to raise 100, or you're spending $5 to raise 100, then you're kind of seen as irresponsible and almost kind of demonized as being an inefficient fundraising office. And I am here to say, especially if you're in a smaller shop, or if you're in something that has kind of a nascent or a new development office, those numbers do not apply to you. When I worked at St. Mary's at Texas A&M, which they've raised over $50 million in the last 10 or 15 years for multiple expansions, new church, annual fund, just a huge thriving program. But when I worked there in the early 2000s, our goal every year was 40%. We wanted to keep our expenses for raising money less than 40% of what ultimately was brought in revenue. And that number was fine. Everybody was good with that. Now, I can't tell you what their number is now or percentage. No idea what that is. But I can tell you that at that time, as we were growing, that 40% level was perfect for us. It allowed us to be able to invest in development. It allowed us to be able to spend money. Like you're saying, you have to spend money to bring in money. So we were able to spend, do a car raffle. We were able to have appeal letters. We were able to host events. We were able to, hire staff and have that staff travel to go see people. And all of that generates money, but we were doing it in a responsible way.
Exactly. And in some ways, if you have that ratio at zero, where you're spending no money in fundraising, you're failing your organization and the people it serves, right? Because you're not
Yeah.
growing, you're not investing in the future of the organization.
Yeah.
So, and in the early years, it might be almost negative, right? You might hire a new development director, and it might take a couple of years for them to actually kind of raise their salary back and then start growing beyond that. But it's an investment in the long term where
Yep.
you are going to start seeing the ratio go down. So,
Yeah, I've used that kind of on that one point, right? So a lot of people do say, if you're just starting a development office, right, your development expenses are the salary of your development officer, right? That you kind of not even thinking about the other things. And so I get that question a lot, like, what should be our goal for our new development officer in terms of raising money to kind of cover his or her salary? And so the rule of thumb that I tell new executive directors or pastors who are kind of just embarking on this is, in year one, if that development officer can raise enough to cover his or her salary, you're in a good spot, right? So that's 1x.
right.
So whatever their salary is, they want to be able to cover that with fundraising revenue. In year two, you're probably looking at 2, maybe 3x their salary, and that's a reasonable, right? So we talked about going from 0 to 1 year, right? There's a sharp increase. Year two, you're kind of slowly burning. You're starting to get that kind of churn. That's 2 to 3x. In year three, though, that number should be 5 to 10x their salary to what's raised. And that's not an unreasonable expectation. There's a lot of factors, right? So don't go and, kind of call your development officer into your office today and say, hey, Andrew said on this podcast, this, like, there should be, now you have some numbers to like look at and gauge. There's a lot of factors involved in that, but that's not an unreasonable expectation. In year three, you're looking at 5 to 10x return on just that fundraiser salary alone in revenue.
This conference is well worth the entire experience, especially for the faithful looking to build the body of Christ. That's what one ministry director said after attending the Petrus Development's Raise conference in 2023. A fundraising staff member from a different organization had this to say: I have several years of experience fundraising, and I found the conference applicable to me. I also saw new to fundraising people getting a lot out of it too. There is literally something for everyone here. In 2024, Raise, the Catholic Fundraising Conference, will be even bigger and even better. Join us on the Riverwalk in San Antonio, Texas, June 24 through 26, 2024. Raise 24 will feature outstanding speakers, great networking opportunities, and an authentically Catholic conference experience. Registration is open now. Learn more at petrusdevelopment.com/raise24. That's petrusdevelopment.com/raise24.
So, like we mentioned earlier, we have this tool, the spreadsheet that we've used in the past. I myself used it in ministry, and we've used it with a number of clients that help us kind of create that budget, create that development plan for the year. Could you kind of just explain? I know we can't see it here on a podcast, we can't pull it up in the video, but could you explain at a high level what's involved with the spreadsheet?
Yeah, it's remarkably simple. That's the way fundraising is, though. Fundraising is simple. It's just that doesn't make it easy, right? So
Right.
this tool is remarkably simple in that you in your A column, you list out all of the different fundraising activities that either have happened in the past, so it's kind of historical activities, or that could be implemented in your development office, right? So it's just simply, you go through your year, and if you're on a fiscal year like we talked about earlier, right? Your back to school appeal might be kind of number one, and then your fall newsletter, and then your end of year appeal, and then your matching gift, and then your your spring event, and you just sort of go through in that A column and list all the things that could generate revenue. And then at the bottom, you put a couple of ongoing efforts like major gifts or direct solicitations or online gifts or monthly gifts. So, kind of list those things that are just ongoing that don't have a time, right? So that's in your A column. So what would that be? Your X axis? I don't. Again, I'm a history major. What do I know? Like your up and down axis, right? So then on your rows, you go across on all your rows, and the first couple of ones are historical, what's been brought in, your goal for this year, and then how you are, kind of where you are in achieving that goal. Are you at 0%? Are you 50% or 100%? And then the next 12 columns are your months of the year. So if you're doing fiscal year, you can do June or July through June, calendar year, January through December. And then as the year goes on, so this is kind of utilizing it, as the year goes on, when your Christmas appeal goes out or end of year appeal, and it generates, $5,000 in revenue. Well, and it's in December, most of that's in December, let's say. So
Right.
you're going to fill in that cell $5,000, and then that's going to go back to your goal. So that's kind of the utilization of it. The nice thing about, that intersection between kind of the programming and the development side, right? Like, how do they even set this budget? Is when you put in all of your fundraising activities in your A column, and then the dollars that you think they're going to generate, it might look like $100,000 is your kind of how much you see coming in. And then your programming office says, that's great, Andrew, or that's great, Rhen, but can you do 150 this year? Because that's, all the things that we want to implement, that's going to be $150,000 budget. And you say, okay, I don't know, but let me look at the spreadsheet. So then you start looking at, instead of saying, yeah, we can do it, or no, we can't, you say, all right, our what I've budgeted for our increase for our Christmas appeal is 5%. Maybe we could do 10%. So let's do 10%, right? And we're not doing a spring raffle this year. We don't have it budgeted to do a spring raffle, but let's say we do a spring raffle. Yeah, we'll do a spring raffle, and that could generate this. So you start kind of like chipping away at that delta. And then at the end of it, you say, all right, I budgeted $10,000 for personal solicitations. But I mean, if I'm serious about this, I could do 20,000. So then you kind of make those changes, and then you come up with your number, and you say, all right, it's 140,000. I'm going to go back to the programming side and say, can you make what I feel comfortable at 140? So let's set your needs budget at 140, and then your wants at 150. And I'm going to do everything I can to get to that number. But you see, it gives you perspective, and it gives you a process for even creating your budget.
Right, and it allows you to sum up, okay, what's our total revenue raised each month, by each month, and what's our total revenue raised by each development activity, and then compare that year to year, right?
Yeah.
I remember I had a situation where one newsletter raised an extraordinary amount compared to normal, and being able to go and see, okay, why is this month so much higher than we anticipated, and so much higher than previous years? Oh, it's because of this newsletter, and this newsletter, we had one gift attributed to it that was actually from some extraordinary gift that we wouldn't normally expect to receive, right? And it just helps you plan the budget to know what's realistic, and to know, are you behind where you hope to be for the year? Are you ahead of it? Are you going to hit that annual goal and complete where you need to be to cover the budget for the year?
And as you're looking to future years, cash flow might be an issue at your organization, right? June and July are always low in cash, and you don't know why. And then you look at this schedule of development activities, and you say, well, we have nothing planned for June and July. And so part of that is maybe it's not strategic, and part of it is we just never thought about planning an event. But if that's a major stressor on the organization and we need to rectify that, well, then now we have the data to support doing something in June or July.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that I found interesting is you gave a presentation on this topic at Raise 23, last year's Catholic Fundraising Conference, and you presented this tool, this spreadsheet, and showed it to the people there. And one thing that came up that kind of overtook the rest of the talk was monthly giving. When people laid out their monthly giving, it feels like a small thing, all these $25, $50 a month gifts. When you add them all up together and show, oh, we have this much coming in this month, and it comes in the next month, and maybe it grows a little bit because you've added some more, and the next month, for a lot of people, that monthly giving piece becomes the biggest line item on their development budget, their plan. And that got a lot of people thinking, like, oh, I should be spending some time on my monthly giving. So it helps you kind of visualize, where are their dollars coming from? Where should I be spending more effort? Maybe where should I be spending less effort to make this development program grow?
Yeah, 100%. Monthly gifts, the average monthly donor lasts for 7 years, and they don't decrease their gift, and they in more cases than not, they increase it. And so if you can add 3 monthly gifts averaging $50 per donor a month, and you put that, you think, oh yeah, well, what difference is that going to make? But then you put it into a spreadsheet, and you start with I'm not going to do the math, but you start with $100 a month in July, and then by the time you get to the next June, you're at $1,200 a month. And then you think, okay, well, now we're starting to see it. And then you roll that to start planning for the next year, and all of a sudden your July is starting at $1,200 a month, and you roll that out over 12 years. It's like, wait, this is like real money here. And it's just about being intentional about your strategies and fundraising. But until you until you kind of get strategic about making the financial plan, you don't realize things like that are as impactful as they are.
Yeah, exactly. So this tool we'll have available for you to download for free. You can go get the spreadsheet, and we'll have it laid out as a template, so you can plug in your own development activities, your own numbers, and start using it to make a development plan for your organization. Well, so there's some examples of how it could be laid out in the tabs on the spreadsheet. So go to petrusdevelopment.com/144. This is episode 144 of the Petrus Development Show. So petrusdevelopment.com/144. You'll be able to access that spreadsheet and download it for free and start using it for your organization.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic.
Great. Well, anything else to say about budgeting and kind of forecasting for your nonprofit as we wrap up here, Andrew?
As a non-numbers guy, I can definitely um, I can sing the praises of going through a budgeting and a financial planning process every year for your nonprofit organization, and the benefits that it will lead to are not just now, but they are long into the future. And so, if this is a process you do and you don't like the way it's done, consider redoing it this year with some of the tips that we've laid out here. If this is a process that you've never thought about because you're just trying to survive the next month, like, go through this process and see what is possible and what the potential is long term, with right strategy and intentionality, and that will give you encouragement and hope and a vision that then ultimately you go share with your donors, you get them excited about it, and then the reality is going to meet the vision.
Absolutely. And I would share two quick tips from my experience in fundraising with this budgeting process. You got to spend the time to track the numbers, right? And don't wait till the end of the fiscal year to go back and track all the numbers of the previous year. I set a calendar reminder for myself every month. Go in and update all the numbers for last month, and so I could track it and see how it's progressing through the year. It's super valuable to spend that time, even though it can be tedious, kind of boring to do all that updating. And kind of related to that, you got to have a good database system that allows you to attribute these gifts. Like, okay, this gift came in because of the Advent appeal letter. This gift is a recurring monthly gift, right? To be able to go in and run a report saying, all right, show me all the recurring monthly gifts from last month. Show me all the gifts that came in from the Advent appeal, right? That just makes this whole process easier and makes everything in your life easier. We did a episode of the podcast a couple months ago about databases. If you're using a spreadsheet to track your data, your donor data, your contact information, and gifts coming in, not just kind of the summary of it, go get yourself a good donor database.
I would agree completely with all of that.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us here today, Andrew. Good to get your insight on this process, and hopefully we can help you, the listener, get your ministry on board with budgeting and forecasting. One announcement today, we're coming up on the end of May, and we have 1 week left to register for Raise 24. If you'd like to join us at the Catholic Fundraising Conference in San Antonio, Texas, June 24th to 26th, registration closes June 7th, which is next Friday, if you're listening to this right when it comes out. So hurry up and get yourself over to petrusdevelopment.com/raise24 and check out all the details of the conference. And I'll even give you a bonus here for our podcast listeners. If you use the promo code RIVERWALK, all one word, you'll get 15% off registration, which is a pretty good savings, about $160 off. So go check that out and hurry up and register before registration closes.
That sounds awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to Raise and seeing all the people that are there to learn about fundraising, to network, to build those relationships, and then to pick up tips like we talked about here. The spreadsheet that will make your financial planning and your budgeting easier, and just the kind of the mindset and the tips that you can glean from the conference in little ways like that are definitely worth the investment.
100%. I'm looking forward to all that. I'm also looking forward, especially to Tex-Mex. Nandy X is taking a break for that week, and we're going hard on the queso for a couple days, I think.
Perfect. Well, you'll have, I guess your whole softball season will be over by then, right? So living large on queso in San Antonio is no concern to you at that point.
It's all about next year. We're preparing for next year as soon as this season's over.
That's right. Crunch the data, input the numbers into your spreadsheet, and then make your team assignments with your metrics informed.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks for joining us, Andrew, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, Rhen.
I'm so glad that you could join us for this episode of the Petrus Development Show. Do you know anybody whose ministry needs to take their fundraising to the next level? Please pass along this show to them. And if you haven't already, take a minute and do 3 things. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. If you like the show, give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review. And check out our website, petrusdevelopment.com. Your ministry and the kingdom need good people doing great development work, and your donors receive just as much benefit from giving as your organization does from receiving. And as it says in Luke 5, cast your nets out into the deep. Be bold and the Lord will provide. God bless, and we'll see you next time.